Hi there, it's me, Finn, and tonight we're going to talk about something warm, crusty, but maybe not so cozy. Why it sucked to be a baker in Victorian England. Now, most of us love the smell of bread, that fresh, yeasty scent wafting from the oven. Ah, soft rolls, crusty loaves, warm buns early in the morning. But imagine for a moment, what if you were the one baking all that, every single day, before sunrise, after midnight, in a dark, smoke-filled room, with soot, grime, rats. Did you know bakers were often fined or even imprisoned just because their bread was too light or too dark? And maybe, just maybe, the worst part wasn't the heat, or the hours, or the health issues, but something even deeper, a strange, quiet kind of suffering. Let's start by subscribing. It all began, not at dawn, but far before it, in the heart of a misty London street. Let's say around 2:45 in the morning, when the world was quiet. Gas lamps flickered outside, and horses' hooves echoed from somewhere far down the cobblestones. The baker's alarm. Well, he didn't really have one. Most bakers trained their bodies to wake up naturally, before 3 a.m., every day. Because if you were late, even by 30 minutes, the entire day's orders might fail. Bread wasn't a luxury, it was the food. For poor families, sometimes it was the only food. So, let's walk inside, shall we? Carefully push open the creaky wooden door, and feel that dry, chalky warmth hit your face. Not the pleasant smell of baking just yet. Not at all. At this hour, it's just the scent of preparation. Old flour dust, leftover smoke from yesterday's ashes, a faint tang of yeast, and, the sweaty stink of the last shift's shirt left behind. The baker. He's already there, bent over a heavy wooden table, mixing, folding, kneading, again and again and again. His shirt clings to his back, already damp. The heat hasn't even begun. Now here's something you probably didn't know. Back then, most bakeries weren't spacious modern stores, with open shelves and cheerful chalkboards. Nope, Victorian bakeries were tiny, cramped, hot. The ovens? They were built of bricks, thick, ancient stone that had to be fired manually with wood or coal for hours. If the fire didn't start right, the bread would fail. If the coal gave off too much smoke, it could ruin the taste. And if the oven cracked from the heat, well, there went your entire livelihood. Now, what was the baker making? Bread, yes. But not just one kind. There were dozens, and each class of society expected something different. The poor? They got brown bread, often called household bread. It was coarse, hard, made from less refined flour, cheaper to produce. Middle-class folks wanted white bread. Fluffy, refined, smooth, even though it was stripped of nutrients. But, did you know? Some bakers added alum or chalk to make their bread look whiter. That's right. They bleached it. With chemicals. It wasn't illegal at the time. The whiter your bread, the wealthier you looked, even if that whiteness came from poison. And then there were the specialty items. Tea cakes, cottage loaves, milk rolls. If your bakery had clients from the upper middle class, you had to know all those shapes and sizes, and how to make them on time, every time. So, imagine, you're making 50+ loaves before sunrise, by hand, without a stand mixer, without a thermometer, without a timer, just your eyes, your hands, your nose, your instinct, and if you messed up, your master would know, because most bakers didn't own their own bakeries. They worked under a master baker. He might own the building, the oven, the tools, and you were just an apprentice. Or maybe a journeyman, if you were lucky. You lived upstairs, maybe above the shop, or in a narrow attic, with a straw mattress and one cracked window. No fan, no heat, just sweat in the summer, and cold damp air in the winter. And yet, still, you had to be up before everyone else, every single day. Now here's where things get a little more difficult. The baker's health. Bakers in Victorian England suffered from a very peculiar set of health problems. Their lungs, constantly filled with flour dust. Their backs, bent from hours of kneading and lifting. Their skin, often burned or cracked from standing next to open ovens all day. And their eyes. Yes, many bakers developed early vision problems, because most of their work happened before sunrise, in dim light, often candlelight, flickering shadows dancing on the dough. The Victorian bakery was also noisy, clanky, grueling. There was no peaceful music, just the sound of bread trays clattering, the dull thump of dough being thrown onto the table, the hiss of water against hot bricks, and here's something most people never consider. Bakers had to stay clean, which you'd think would be easy. But with all that flour, soot, sweat, rats, insects, and yes, sometimes moldy ingredients, staying hygienic was near impossible. Still, if you weren't clean, customers complained, the bakery could be fined or shut down. Victorian health inspectors were starting to show up in cities. And when they came, oh dear, it wasn't a pleasant visit. Your nails, your apron, your workbench, all inspected. If any of it failed to meet the basic standard, you could be in trouble. Now, let's talk about bread weights. Yes, bread was regulated, by law. Loaves had to weigh a specific amount, not too heavy, not too light. If a customer bought a loaf and thought it felt a little small, they could bring it to the local weights and measures officer. If it was underweight, you, the baker, were fined, publicly, sometimes even arrested. One newspaper from 1853 told of a London baker who was charged after selling bread that was a mere 1 ounce too light. He insisted the bread had dried out after baking. But the court didn't care. Harsh, isn't it? But then again, bread was life. For the poorest families, a bad loaf might mean hunger for the day. And customers weren't always kind. Many were tired, stressed, angry. They stood in line at 6 a.m., often with crying children, empty baskets, cold hands. And if their usual loaf wasn't ready, they didn't say, "Oh well." They yelled, accused the baker of slacking, or worse, of using fake ingredients. Which some did. Yes, some bakers, especially in poorer districts, cut their flour with cheaper substances, powdered chalk, ground bones, or even plaster. Why? To make more profit. Or just to stay afloat. Bread was taxed. Flour prices changed weekly. And bakers couldn't always raise prices without losing customers. So, cutting corners was sometimes the only option, even if it poisoned people slowly. Now, let's slow down a bit. Take a little breath. Imagine our baker now. He's 41 years old, has a family upstairs, 2 daughters, 1 wife, a dog. He's been baking since he was 14, and yet he barely owns anything. The shop belongs to someone else. The profits go elsewhere. The hours? Still the same. The aches in his joints? Getting worse. Still, every morning he wakes up, mixes the flour, lights the fire, prepares the dough, and watches the first glow of sunrise spill through the fogged window. There's a quiet pride in that, isn't there? Even if his feet burn, even if his apron smells, even if no one ever says thank you, he still makes the bread. And that's where we'll pause tonight. Not with drama, not with shock, but with a slow breath, and the quiet scent of bread rising in the dark. Now where were we? Yes. Our baker, tired, sore, his hands white with flour, his back already stiff, standing quietly before the old wooden counter, watching the dough rise. You'd think this part of the day might be easy, right? The bread is resting, the hard part is over. But oh, not quite. Because now begins the shaping. Each dough ball must be folded, rolled, pinched, and smoothed into shape. Not roughly, not lazily, but with care, even deliberate, calming movements. The weight must feel just right in your palm. Too tight, and the bread will crack while baking. Too loose, and it will flatten. Our baker doesn't need a clock. He knows the time by the way the dough feels, by the smell in the air. It's soft now, yeasty, slightly sweet. That means the oven must be hot. And now comes one of the hardest parts of all, the firing. Let's talk about that oven. It isn't like the neat metal boxes you and I know. It's a cavern, a giant brick mouth, fed with firewood, or coal. The fire must be lit hours before any bread is placed inside. And to know if the temperature is right, well, there was no thermostat. The baker would hold his hand, just a few inches inside, for exactly 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. If his skin began to tingle by the 3rd second, it was perfect. If it burned before then, too hot. If he could hold it in for 4 seconds, too cold. Sometimes, he'd toss a bit of flour on the bricks. If it browned quickly and evenly, good. If it smoked or burned, bad. Simple tricks, ancient tricks, passed down from one baker to the next. But still, every fire was different. Some days it was wet. The coal was damp. The kindling refused to catch. Other days, the wind blew smoke back into the bakery. The whole room would fill with soot. Tears would sting the eyes. Lungs would feel tight. But the bread still had to bake. And now, he opens the iron door. The fire glows dim red, like coals smothered in sleep. He pulls them out with a thick iron rake, clears the ashes, and sweeps the oven floor with a long wooden pole wrapped in a wet cloth. Ah, the hiss of steam, then silence. A breathless moment, and then, carefully, gently, loaf by loaf, he begins to slide the shaped dough onto the baking floor. 1, 2, 3, until the entire oven is full. Now, he waits. This waiting time, it's not restful, it's anxious. Because if he waits too long, the loaves will burn. If he checks too early, the temperature will drop. And he knows, behind the curtain, the shop bell will ring soon. And Mrs. Little from down the lane will stomp in, demanding her cottage loaf. And the man with the limp, what's his name? Alfred. He'll want a 3-penny tin loaf, exactly at 6:30. If the bread isn't ready, oh, he'll mutter about it all the way to the butcher. So the baker paces. He cleans a little. He checks the next batch of dough. He listens to the oven. He smells the air. And finally, when the scent is just right, when the air is golden, warm, earthy, almost nutty, he opens the oven door. Rows of bread. Round, brown, glowing like small suns. Carefully, he uses the peel, a long-handled wooden paddle, to lift each loaf out. One by one, until all the loaves are out, cooling on wide wooden racks. The scent now, it fills the entire bakery. A rich warmth, home-like, ancient. It's the smell of comfort, of survival, of mornings that start before the world is ready. And, here it comes. The first soft ting of the bell above the door. The shop is open. Let's go to the front now. It's still early, barely past 6. The sky outside is gray, not quite light, not quite dark. Candles still flicker behind some windows. Chimneys puff a thin blue smoke. A milkman trundles by. And outside our bakery, there's a line. 5 or 6 people, all quiet, hunched in their coats, holding baskets. They aren't here for small talk. They're here for bread. And some of them haven't eaten since yesterday. Let's pause on that. In Victorian England, especially in the 1840s and 50s, vegetables were seasonal. Milk spoiled quickly. But bread, it was filling, cheap, available. So the baker wasn't just a tradesman. He was the gatekeeper of survival. And with that came pressure, and scrutiny, and stress. Because if you ran out of bread, if your prices went up, if your flour was poor, your customers suffered. And they never forgot. Now, let's look at a few of them. There's Mrs. Little, as expected. She's wearing a shawl, hair pinned tightly, holding a straw basket. She sniffs at the air, nods. Good batch today. Then there's Alfred. Yes, limping slightly. Always complains about the crust. And behind him, 2 young chimney sweeps, barely 12, already black with soot. They want penny rolls. Our baker wraps them in wax paper, drops them into tiny cloth sacks. He doesn't speak much, only nods, because the work is far from over. By 7:30, the first batch is gone. Gone, all gone. Shelves empty. Time to start again. But here's something we haven't talked about yet. Bread riots. Yes, real riots. In some parts of England, especially during times of famine or economic downturn, bakeries were targeted. Why? Because when bread prices rose, people believed bakers were profiting from their misery. Sometimes, just tried to survive. Still, it didn't matter. If you were a baker, and the bread wasn't affordable, your windows might get smashed. You might get spat at in the street. There were cases, of whole shops being burned. It didn't happen every week, but the fear was always there, especially in crowded cities like London, Manchester, Liverpool. The larger your bakery, the bigger the target. And here's the other thing. If your bakery failed, that was it. There were no bailouts, no unemployment benefits, no second chances. If you couldn't pay rent, you lost the shop. If you got sick, too bad. If your oven cracked, or your flour delivery was late, or a customer accused you of poisoning their child, your reputation could be destroyed in a single day. So bakers lived carefully, quietly, rarely socialized. Many didn't marry until late. They worked long hours, saved every penny. Some even slept in the shop, literally on flour sacks to protect their goods. And you thought baking was gentle work. But here's something more subtle. Let's go back to our baker's mind. His thoughts, his fatigue, his dreams, or, rather, lack of them. Because when you work 16 hours a day, every day, you stop dreaming. Your sleep becomes flat, dreamless, deep, like falling into a stone well. And when you wake up, you don't stretch, or smile, or blink at the sunshine. No, you reach for your boots. You splash cold water on your face. You light the fire. You check the flour. You begin, again. Let's pause there. Take a breath. Maybe, just maybe, in some strange way, our baker didn't hate it. Maybe he liked the rhythm. Maybe the dough in his hands felt more honest than words. Maybe, shaping bread gave him a peace he didn't find anywhere else. He never said it. But maybe, he didn't need to. And now, the sky is turning pale blue outside. Children run past the bakery window, laughing. The second batch is already rising. The fire crackles quietly. A cat curls up by the hearth. And our baker sits for just a moment, hands in his lap, eyes closed, listening to the quiet between deliveries, to the ticking of the wall clock, to the distant hum of carts outside. Just a small breath of calm before it all begins again. So the second batch is in the oven now. The shop has quieted again. And our baker, he leans back slightly, on the same wooden stool he's leaned on every day for the past, 15 years, maybe more. And around him, the smell of yeast, warmth, coal smoke and fresh bread is still thick in the air. There's something ancient about that smell, you know. It clings to the walls, the ceiling beams, the cloth of your shirt. You could be blindfolded and still know you're in a bakery. Even centuries ago. But this peaceful moment, it's brief. Because just as the baker begins to rub the flour from his forearms, he hears it, a rustle, a thump, the flour delivery. Let's talk about that. You see, back then, bakers didn't have industrial delivery trucks, forklifts or massive storage silos. Flour came in canvas sacks, usually around 140 pounds each. They were delivered by cart, drawn by horse, and carried by hand down narrow cobbled lanes. Each sack had to be lifted, dragged and stacked in the storeroom by the baker himself. Unless he had an apprentice. But apprentices weren't free either. So many worked alone. Imagine that for a moment. The rough cloth against your shoulder, the shifting weight, the dust exploding into your nose with every step. It wasn't just exhausting, it was risky. One misstep on the uneven stone floor, your ankle rolls, and that's it. You're done for the day. Maybe even the week. And that meant no bread, no sales, no money. Not to mention the fine dust from the flour. It got everywhere. Into the lungs, into the eyelashes, even under the fingernails. Over time, bakers developed a cough, a deep, dry one. Some called it baker's lung. They didn't know what it was back then, but we know now. It was chronic flour dust inhalation. Long exposure inflamed the lungs, caused wheezing, fatigue, and because it was just part of the job. So now, the sacks are inside, stacked neatly in the corner, beside the old wooden bin where the flour is sifted. The baker cuts one open with a dull blade, and sighs, because the flour, it's off-white, clumpy, a bit damp. That means this batch was exposed to moisture on the journey. Maybe the cart was uncovered. Maybe it rained. Maybe the miller rushed. Whatever the reason, this flour will be a nightmare to work with. It'll need more sifting, more time, more effort, and worst of all, it might make the bread dense. Victorian customers. Oh, they noticed everything. They'd tear the loaf in half, right in front of you, sniff it, squish it, even chew it like they were testing for gold. Too heavy, you'd hear about it. Too dry, they'd tell the neighbors. Too chewy, forget it. You might lose 5 customers in a week. So the pressure, it's always there, even with something as simple as flour. But let's take a step back now. Let's talk about something else. The rules. Did you know, bakers in Victorian England were under strict regulations? Yes. Not just on price, but on weight. You weren't allowed to sell a loaf that was too light. The government had inspectors. They were called bread assizers. Funny name, right? But serious job. They would come, unannounced, and weigh your bread. If it was too light, even by an ounce, you could be fined, or worse, publicly shamed. Some bakers had their names printed in local papers for cheating the scales, even if it was unintentional. Imagine the stress, trying to keep every loaf exact, not just good, but mathematically fair, with no digital scales, no timers, just your hands, and the pressure of feeding an entire neighborhood. Now, let's wander into the back room again, where the sourdough starter lives. Ah, That bubbling, strange-smelling, slightly alive thing. You know, every bakery had one. It was like a pet, passed down from one baker to another, fed with flour and water, left to rest, then stirred, then fed again. Some starters were over 20 years old. Some had names. It might sound odd, but that starter, it was sacred. It gave your bread its soul, and if something happened to it, if it spoiled, if it died, if it got contaminated, you had to start over, from scratch, and your bread would never taste quite the same. There were bakers who cried, truly cried, when their starters died, because it wasn't just about bread. It was about connection, to time, to place, to people long gone. It was like baking with ghosts. Let that sink in. Outside now the streets are busy. Vendors shouting, horses clopping by. Someone plays a fiddle in the square. The city is wide awake. And here in our small bakery, the fire glows low. The third batch of dough is resting. And the baker, he's thinking about numbers. How much flour is left? How many loaves he still needs? How much coal he'll burn tonight? How many customers asked for buns instead of tins? And how many pennies he'll have left over to bring home? Not much, probably, because while baking fed the neighborhood, it didn't always feed the baker. Here's a little secret. Most Victorian bakers were poor, not just tired, not just hardworking, but truly, deeply, financially fragile. They earned just enough to cover rent, flour, coal, yeast, salt, tools, a bit of meat, maybe a potato or two. There were no savings, no luxuries, and if they had a family, it was even harder. Some lived above the bakery, in small dim rooms with low ceilings and cracked windows. Their wives helped with the books, the sweeping, the selling. Their children delivered bread to neighbors, often barefoot. It was a family trade, and a family burden. And yet, there was a strange sort of pride to it. Because the bread mattered. To make something every day, with your hands, with care, to feed people, to be needed, that counted for something. Even when the hours were long, even when your feet ached, even when no one said thank you. And sometimes, just sometimes, in the quietest part of the day, when the fire was low, and the loaves were cooling, and the shop was still, you'd hear a knock at the back door. Tap tap, and it would be old Mrs. Pattershaw, the one with the knitted gloves and watery eyes. She'd ask if there were any crumbs today. She'd bring her own cloth bag, and the baker wouldn't say a word. He'd just hand her the edges of the morning's batch, the browned bits, the broken ends, still warm, still soft, and she'd nod, quietly, gratefully, and disappear again. You see, it wasn't just a shop, it was a lifeline, to the very old, the very poor, the tired and forgotten, and the baker, somehow, was the quiet center of it all. So the fire burns on, the third batch goes in, the afternoon sun crawls across the dusty window, the chalkboard sign out front reads, "Fresh loaves, 2 pence," and the bell, ting, rings again. As someone steps in from the cold, a girl, maybe 8 years old, clutching a copper coin. She stares up at the shelf, at the round loaf, still steaming, and for just a moment, everything is still. Where were we? Ah yes, the little girl with the copper coin. She stands in the doorway, wrapped in a thin shawl, her cheeks rosy from the wind. Her boots, if we can even call them that, are just scraps of leather, tied with twine. She stares up at the shelf, at the warm, fresh loaf. Her coin clinks gently in her palm. She knows it's not enough, but she hopes. And the baker, well, he doesn't say a word. He leans over, sighs through his nose, and picks the smaller loaf from the tray, the one with the crack in the crust, the one that browned just a little too much. He wraps it loosely in brown paper, folds the top, and places it gently in her hands. No words, just a soft nod. And the girl, she turns and walks quickly out, eyes wide, her little hands tight around the bread like it's a treasure. And it is. See, that moment, that's not rare. That happened every day. Because in Victorian England, poverty wasn't hidden. It was everywhere, and bread was life. It was the center of every table, if there was a table. You weren't just feeding customers, you were feeding the city's soul. But that didn't make your own life easier. Let's step back now into the kitchen. The third batch is out of the oven, cooling on racks made of iron bars and oak slats. The fire glows lower now. It's late afternoon. The bakery smells, yes, like everything all at once. Yeast, ash, crust, flour, sweat. There's a thin layer of white powder across the counters. The baker wipes it with the edge of his sleeve, again, like he's been doing for years. And now, it's time to prep for the next day. Wait, did you think he was done? Oh no. The hardest part is just beginning. Because Victorian bakers didn't just make bread, they made everything. Small pies, rolls, tarts, puddings, rye buns, seed cakes, hot cross buns if it was spring, gingerbread if it was autumn, and each one had to be started the night before. So now, our baker reaches for the ledger, a big leather-bound book. Not for money though. Sometimes he jots down a few numbers, but for recipes, ratios, timings. It's stained with butter and soot. The corners are curled. The ink is faded. Some pages are in his father's handwriting, some in his own. The ledger is older than his youngest child. He flips to the page for suet puddings, because tomorrow is Friday, and on Fridays, the dock workers come early for breakfast rolls, and something sweet. And if you want them to come back, the pudding better be good. He starts to measure. He reaches into the sugar bin, and, there's a crunch. He frowns, lifts his hand, and sees a thin black beetle crawling across the palm. The sugar is infested. It happens, often. Back then, storage wasn't airtight. There were no plastic tubs, no Tupperware, no refrigeration, just wooden bins, sometimes tin-lined. Bakers had to sift everything, by hand. Sometimes, they just picked the bugs out. Because throwing sugar away, that was unthinkable. Sugar was expensive, imported, priced like gold dust. If your supplier gave you a bad batch, tough luck. You had to make it work, or close shop. He pours the sugar into a sieve, taps it gently. The grains fall through. Tap, tap, tap. Tiny black specks gather in the mesh. He wipes them away, tries not to think about it, and moves on. The suet is next. White, waxy, animal fat, rendered from beef, softened over time. It smells, not great, but it's what makes the puddings rich. He measures by eye, chops, mixes. There's a rhythm to it, a calm, despite the grit, the dust, the beetles. This is his world, and it works. Now, let's shift our gaze, just a little. Look at the walls. See the cracks, the faded paint. That's not just age, that's moisture. You see, Victorian bakeries, especially in the city, were damp. Steam from the ovens, rain seeping through brick, condensation along cold stone. It gathered, it dripped. Sometimes it pooled behind the stove. Sometimes it soaked the flour sacks. And with moisture, came mold. Black specks, green fuzz, strange white threads. The baker checked every surface, every bin, because if mold spread, it could ruin everything. Once it got into your dough, you might not even taste it until it was too late. And then, the whole batch had to be tossed. Imagine, 10 loaves, gone. Just like that. No refund, no insurance, no backup, just loss. So the baker scrubbed, every night, with vinegar, with soap, with scalding water, his hands red, wrinkled, cracked. But he didn't stop, because he couldn't. And now, it's almost evening. The sun is low, the shadows long. You'd think he'd rest, but no. Because the yeast must be fed. The dough for tomorrow must be started. The coals must be banked. The trays wiped. The bins sealed. The counters cleared. The ledger closed. The front sign flipped to closed. It's a ritual. Every single day. And finally, when all is still, the baker climbs the narrow stairs behind the oven, to a small smoky room under the eaves. His home. It smells like burnt crust and wet linen. The walls are thin. You can hear mice in the rafters. A bed. A wash basin. A tiny table. One cracked mirror. And a stool. That's it. He sits, rubs his eyes, wipes his palms on his knees, and listens to the silence. A silence filled with warmth, exhaustion, and something else, something quieter. Maybe peace. No, not peace, but acceptance. Yes, a quiet knowing that tomorrow he'll rise again, before the crows, before the milkmen, before the gas lamps are lit, and he'll do it all over again, because he has to, because bread is needed, and someone has to make it, no matter how hard it is, no matter how much it, sucked. With that, he closes his eyes, and the coals glow dim, and the city sleeps on. Morning again. But not bright and fresh, not yet. It's that velvet black kind of morning, the one just before dawn, when the air outside is cold enough to mist the windows, when the cobblestones are slick with dew, when even the lamplighters are still half asleep, their torches sputtering in the wind. Inside the bakery, it's not much warmer. The oven hasn't been lit yet. The coals from last night are gray and brittle. The air is still, dry, and quiet, except for the soft shuffling of the baker's feet on the stone floor, and the sound of his breath. Another day begins. He doesn't speak. There's no one to speak to. He just moves. First the apron, stiff with old flour, folded at the waist. Then the sleeves, rolled high, exposing arms dusted with pale scars from 100 tiny burns. Next, the fire. It's always the fire. He kneels, opens the iron door. A waft of cold ash escapes. He pokes the old coals, stirs them, checks for life. There isn't any, so he starts from scratch, slips in a twist of newspaper, a few slivers of kindling, strikes a match. Ah, there it is. The flame dances, tentative, golden. It catches the splinters, then the thicker wood, then the coal. It'll take a full hour before the oven is hot enough. So while it breathes itself awake, he begins his prep. There's something sacred about this hour. Lonely, yes, but calm. Still, the bakery hasn't yet been touched by the noise of the day. The door's still locked. The street is still empty. And the dough? It waits, covered in a damp cloth, puffed gently in its bowl. He lifts the cloth, checks it, prods it, nods. Good. The rise is right. He turns the dough onto the counter, worn, soft, splintered at the edges. The wood creaks under the weight, and he begins. Fold, turn, press, fold, turn, press, over and over, kneading not just with strength, but rhythm. It's like a song, one his hands have memorized better than his mouth ever could. He doesn't think about it, he just moves. And slowly, the room begins to warm. The scent of the fire reaches out. The shadows soften. The windows start to fog. Time passes. The loaves are shaped now. 4 large rounds, 6 tins, 3 flatbreads, each one placed carefully onto floured trays. He slides one tray into the warm chamber near the fire, lets them rest again, rising, always rising, because that's what bread does, and maybe that's the only poetry in the baker's life. Rising, falling, rising again. Now, he has a moment, just one. He pours a cup of tea, from yesterday's leaves. It's cold, weak, but it's something. He leans against the counter, sips, watches the shadows shift on the ceiling, and thinks, not about the bread. No, he's thinking about George, his old apprentice. Gone now, not dead. No, just moved on. Joined a bigger bakery across town. Gas ovens, better tools, higher wages. The baker doesn't blame him. Not really. George had a sharp mind, quick hands. He deserved more than this. More than soot and splinters, and cracked sugar bins. Still, it's quiet without him. Too quiet. He hears the first sound of boots on cobblestones outside. The morning milk cart. The clink of bottles, a muttered curse from the driver, then a distant church bell. 5 chimes, almost time. He slides the first batch into the oven. The air shifts, the smell begins. That early smell, of raw dough hitting heat, of steam and crust and old iron. It's not quite bread yet, but it will be, soon. Now, let's talk about something the baker doesn't say out loud. Let's talk about competition. Because in Victorian England, there were bakers everywhere, on nearly every street corner, some legal, some not. Some worked from proper shops, with licenses and scales and inspectors. Others, they baked out of cellars, sheds, side doors, used cheap flour, watered it down, added chalk or alum or worse, sold loaves for half the price. And the people, they bought it, because they had to, even if it was bad, even if it made their children sick. The baker, he couldn't match their prices, not unless he cut corners too. But he didn't. He couldn't bring himself to. So some days, he sold nothing, watched as customers walked past, to the cheaper loaves, the thinner crusts, the dangerous dough. It ate away at him, not because he was proud, but because he knew what it meant. That bread, true bread, was becoming a luxury, when it should have been a birthright. Still, he baked, even on days when no one came, even when the loaves sat on the shelf until they were stale. He baked, even on days when no one came, even when the loaves sat on the shelf until they were stale. He baked. Because to stop was unthinkable. And sometimes, just sometimes, a miracle happened, like the one time old Mrs. Pattershaw, yes, her again, brought 3 coins instead of 1. Where had she gotten them? No one knew, but she smiled, wide toothless, and bought 2 whole loaves, then shared one with the girl from next door, right there on the step. They tore it in half, like communion, steam rising in the frost. It wasn't just food. It was connection. It was grace. That night, the baker didn't eat, but he went to bed, full. The loaves are done now, golden, cracked, perfect. He lines them on the shelf, brushes off the crumbs, wipes his hands. Then at last, he unlocks the door, and the world spills in. A boy with a cart, a woman in black, a man with coal on his boots. The first rush, always the same, Small coins, quick chatter, a nod, a grunt, bread into cloth, coins into hand, and gone. No time for stories. No one looks up. Just need, transaction, warmth. It's brief, but fierce. And then, quiet again. The baker stands behind the counter, looks at the shelf. 4 loaves gone, 8 remain. That's better than yesterday. He allows himself a small nod. Maybe a good day then. Maybe. And now, he reaches for his cloth, wipes the counter, checks the oven, flips the chalkboard. Fresh bread, still warm. Then, he leans on the stool, lets out a long quiet sigh. Not quite relief, just release, and watches as the day unfolds. Outside, the city wakes. Inside, the warmth holds. And for now, that's enough. Mini routes. For not warm. Ninod wait, lult. That pale, yellow Victorian kind of morning light. The kind that makes fog glow and gas lamps flicker out like ghosts slipping away. Inside the bakery, the scent of bread still lingers in the corners. Crumbs on the counter. A little pile of flour near the scales. Half a crust cooling on a wire rack. It's quieter now. Customers gone. Just the baker again. And the silence. He likes it this in-between hour. When the fire is low, and the morning's rush is done. When it's too early to clean properly, but too late to sit and do nothing. This is when he does something no one sees. Something strange. He opens the ledger. It's not a real ledger. Not for taxes or inspectors. No. This one's just notes. Little scribbles. Observations. Reminders. Small things. Flour was thin again. Ask Wilson. Add caraway to brown loaves. And today's note? He taps the quill, sighs and writes. Loaf for Mrs. Stillwell. No charge. That's the 4th free loaf this week. But what's he supposed to do? The woman's husband works the iron yard. Comes home coughing black. 3 kids, one with a twisted foot. She buys what she can. But it's never quite enough. He can't look at her hands, thin as twigs, and still ask for coin. So he gives. Quietly. No show. No thanks needed. Just slides the loaf across the counter. Nods, looks away. And she understands. Now you might be wondering, why doesn't the baker just raise his prices, make up for the losses? Other tradesmen did. The blacksmith charged extra for horseshoes last week. The cobbler added 2pence for heel replacements. But the baker can't. Because bread is different. Bread is daily. It's not a luxury. It's not an indulgence. It's life. If he charges too much, people go hungry. Simple as that. So he keeps the price where it's always been. Even if that means some days he loses money. He just sighs, adjusts the flour a little, stretches the dough more than he likes, adds a little extra water to the batch, and hopes the crust hides it. Now, let's go upstairs. Yes, upstairs, above the bakery, where the walls lean inwards and the air smells faintly of yeast and firewood. There's no carpet up here, just wood, splintered, soft at the edges, and a narrow bed, against the wall. The mattress is straw, the blanket is thin, there's a chair, a cracked basin, a nail on the wall holding 2 shirts. This is the baker's whole world. Downstairs, heat and bread. Upstairs, cold and sleep. He doesn't spend much time here. Just enough. A few hours to close his eyes, to rest his knees. He doesn't dream much. Maybe he used to. But not anymore. Now it's just blackness, silence, and the slow exhale of exhaustion. Sometimes he hears the street noises through the walls. A baby crying, a horse passing, rain tapping at the glass. But he doesn't stir. The body is tired, deep tired, bone tired. He sleeps like stone. And then, always too soon, he wakes. Not to an alarm. No. Victorian bakers didn't have clocks beside their beds. They had instinct, habit. Their bodies were trained like timepieces. To stir at the same hour, move at the same rhythm, every single day. So he wakes. Still dark, still aching, still half in dream. And yet, he rises. Again. Now let's talk about inspections. Yes, the government. They'd send men now and then, with stiff collars, notebooks, and clipboards, or at least what passed for them in 1860. They'd come in through the front, not knock, just appear, glance at the loaves, check the scales, lift the sacks of flour with suspicious eyes. And then, they'd smell the air. Like that could prove something. Sometimes they were kind, nodded, left, but other times, they fined him. for dust near the hearth, for a crack in the window, for a fly that landed on the tray. Never mind that he swept daily, that he scrubbed the boards until his knuckles bled. They didn't care. A mark was a mark, and the fine, half a week's income, maybe more. No appeal, no mercy, just ink on paper, and the sound of coins slipping away. He hated those visits. Not because he feared punishment, but because he hated the way they looked at him, like he was dirty, like he was less. But they didn't see what he saw. They didn't see the child who smiled when she smelled warm bread, or the old man who traded a poem for a scone, or the way steam curled around the window like fingers searching for light. They saw crusts. He saw people. Still, he cleaned harder after they left, scrubbed until his hands stung, just in case they came back. And sometimes, they did, just to remind him who was in charge. Now, let's talk about sugar. Yes, sugar. It was changing the bakery world. Before, bread was just bread. Savory. Necessary. But now people wanted sweet. Buns. Tarts. Tea cakes. Little iced loaves. Stuff that didn't feed the belly so much as feed the tongue. And it was expensive. Sugar wasn't cheap. And butter? Even worse. But people wanted it. They'd come in asking for treats. Something nice for the baby's birthday. Or a bun for church day. And he hated saying no. So, he experimented. Tried to make a little go a long way. Added raisins when he could find them. Drizzled honey when sugar ran low. He even tried currants once. Just a handful. Folded into a tiny soft bun. Gave it to a boy who had never tasted anything sweet in his life. The child took one bite and cried. Right there. Tears, big and quiet, down his cheeks. The baker hadn't expected that. Didn't know what to say. Just handed the boy another one. Watched him walk away, mouth full, eyes wide. That bun cost nearly half a day's sugar. But it felt worth it. Just for that moment. Later that week, the boy came back, with his sister. Clutched her hand. Pointed to the tray. Didn't speak. Just looked up. Hopeful. The baker, he only had one bun left. So he broke it in half. Gave each child a piece. And smiled. He didn't eat that night. But he didn't feel hungry either. This is the rhythm of a Victorian baker. Not glory. Not fortune. Just repetition. Heat. Dough. Silence. Scars on hands. Dust in lungs. But also, the smell of crust. The gleam of morning light on golden loaves. The stillness of early hours. The quiet satisfaction of doing something well, even when no one notices, especially then. And tomorrow, it will be the same. He knows that. It doesn't bother him. Because this is his world, and he will keep shaping it, one loaf at a time. Just the embers glowing faintly in the brick oven, like tired eyes refusing to close. Outside, London whispers. Not loud, just murmurings. A distant carriage clacking across cobblestones. A dog's bark, far away. And soft rain beginning to tap on the shutters. Almost the baker stands at the back window, looking into the black. His apron is still dusted with flour, even though he's cleaned it twice. Hands sore. Fingers cracked at the knuckles. That kind of ache that feels old, even when you're still young. He stares into the night. Thinks about the morning to come. About the dough that needs starting. The coal that needs hauling. And about his friend Thomas. Thomas was a baker once too. But last winter, he stopped. Closed the shutters for good. The rent was too high. The mill had doubled their price on flour again. And his body, well, it gave out. Arthritis in both wrists. Couldn't knead anymore. And in this world, if you can't knead, you can't feed. So now, Thomas sells firewood. Slowly. With a limp. Cold fingers curled under splinters. The baker sees him now and then. Helps when he can. But there's not much extra to go around. Not when half the week's earnings vanish on wood and flour. And the inspector's fine still isn't fully paid. You'd think being a baker meant warmth. Ovens. Glowing coals. Heat and comfort. But the truth. It's strange. Because outside people think it's cozy in here. A dream. But inside. It's cold. In the bones. Not from temperature, but from weight. Weight of debt. Weight of tired limbs. Weight of knowing that at any moment, one crack in the chimney, 1 week of spoiled flour, one broken kneading trough, and it could all crumble. Now, tonight's a bit different. The baker has a visitor, unexpected. A girl, maybe 11. She knocks, very softly. He opens the door, and there she is, in the rain, her dress soaked, a small cloth bundle in her arms. She doesn't speak right away, just looks up, wide eyes, mouth tight, And then, slowly, she unwraps the bundle. Inside, 3 old buttons, 1 broken thimble, and a tiny worn silver spoon. Ava. She offers it. For a roll. Just one. A dinner roll. He doesn't ask questions. Doesn't ask where her parents are. Or why she's alone in the dark. He just nods. Takes the bundle. Gives her 2 rolls instead of 1. One in her hand. The other in her pocket. She doesn't smile. She just nods, like an old woman might, and turns back into the night. And the baker, he stands there for a long time, looking at that broken thimble, wondering how many stitches it's sewn, how many fingers it's protected. And now, it's bought a child, 2 rolls of bread. Life in small exchanges. Quiet trades. No records. No thanks. Just survival. Let's drift down the lane now. Past his shop. Past the cobbler and the tea house. To the alley near the butcher's. There's a boy there. 17 maybe. Dirty hands. Eyes too tired for his age. He used to work for the baker. A few hours a day. Sweeping. Stacking wood. Running errands to the mill. But one morning, he didn't show up. And the baker heard. He'd been caught stealing apples. Thrown out of the workhouse. Now he sleeps in a cellar corner. When he's lucky. The baker hasn't seen him for days. But tonight, he leaves a heel of bread behind the bins. Just in case. And the next morning, it's gone. No words. Just crumbs. And that's enough. Let's talk about the coal. Oh, coal was everything. No gas ovens here. Just thick chunks of black rock. Bought by the stone. Dragged in burlap sacks from the corner merchant. Always damp. Always heavy. The baker's arms ached more from hauling coal than kneading dough. And if it was raining, then the sacks turned to mud. And his boots would fill with water as he stacked it behind the oven. No coal. No fire. No fire. No bread. It was that simple. So he always bought extra when he could. Hid some in a box under the stairs. Wrapped it in canvas. Just in case. Because sometimes, coal went missing. Sometimes the boy who swept the floor would sneak a lump in his coat. And the baker never said anything. Because, well, if he needed it that bad, then maybe someone else needed warmth even more than the bread needed heat. Now, let's talk about water. Ah yes, the ingredient no one thinks about. But in a bakery, water is as precious as flour. It had to be hauled, in buckets, from a pump, down the street, twice a day. Just muscle, and balance, and patience. If the pump froze in winter, he'd break the ice with a hammer, and spill half the first bucket on his boots. Every day, more buckets, spilled downstairs, sopped with towels. And yet, without it, no dough, no steam, no clean counter, no washed hands. So he carried it, quietly, without thanks, just like always, over and over. It wears the body, but soothes the mind. Because in the chaos of the world, the oven is always warm, the dough always rises, if you treat it well. The crust always browns if you wait long enough. And the people, well, they always come. Poor, hungry, quiet, but grateful. Always grateful, even when they can't say it out loud. The baker had a tin box under the counter, filled with old coins, buttons, little tokens, bits and bobs people had traded over the years. A child's drawing, a silk ribbon, a tooth. Yes, someone once gave a baby tooth for a scone. He kept them all, not because they were valuable, but because they were stories, proof that his work meant something, that even when it sucked, even when his back was on fire, and his eyes stung from smoke, he had made someone's day a little easier, a little warmer, a little softer. And that was enough. Now the embers have cooled, the rain has stopped, the girl hasn't returned. But the baker? He still waits, every night, just in case. Maybe she'll trade a pebble next time, or a string, or maybe she'll bring nothing at all, and he'll give her the roll anyway. Because bread is daily. Bread is life, and the baker? He may be poor, exhausted, forgotten, but he is still, in his own quiet way. The sky still has that gentle gray hue, like the inside of an old teacup, cloudy, soft, silent. It's morning again, but not the kind you want to wake up to. The kind of morning where the cold is already biting at the corners of the window frame, where your breath fogs up the glass, even from across the room, where the fire barely caught in the oven, and your fingers are too stiff to tie your apron. The baker? He's already been up for hours, trying to coax the embers back to life. Gently, carefully, like you'd cradle a sleepy cat from a windowsill. The coal is damp today. It hisses when he adds it, spits back at him, like it's protesting. And the chimney? She's moody too. The smoke doesn't rise as it should. Just curls, swirls, lingers inside the bakery like an unwanted guest. His eyes sting. He doesn't say a word, just keeps feeding it. Bit by bit, the dough needs rising, and the fire must burn. That's just how it is. You'd think by now, he'd have better tools. But his oven? It's old. Built back when Victoria was still young herself. Bricks chipped. Iron door rusting at the hinges. The thermometer? There isn't one. He knows it's hot enough by scent alone, by watching how the crusts color, by pressing his palm gently to the side, and reading the heat like a book. It's a language he's learned by pain, by trial, and by far too many burnt bottoms. Let's step outside for a moment. Out the back door, where the air feels just a little less heavy, where the stacked flour sacks are covered with a tarp, held down by stones from the Thames, where the crates of stale bread are left for the poor, sometimes eaten, sometimes nibbled by rats first. The baker doesn't mind. If it fills a belly, even a small one, then it's not wasted. Sometimes he watches the alley just before sunrise, watches a boy with no shoes take a loaf, or a mother with her shawl drawn tight, tucking 2 rolls under her coat for her children. No words exchanged, just nods, tiny movements of gratitude, as quiet as moth wings. Back inside, he begins preparing the day's sweet dough. Not many can afford the sweet buns, but on Sundays, he bakes them anyway. Yes, with little bits of currant, just a sprinkle, enough to taste like something special. They remind him of his mother. She used to bake them once a month, back when they had more to spare, when butter was a luxury, not a calculation. Now, he saves the better ingredients in a small tin by the hearth. A jar of syrup, a nub of cinnamon bark, 1 vial of orange blossom water, unopened. He's waiting for a reason. Waiting for boots loud on the wooden floor, measuring stick in hand. He tapped it against the counter. Thwack thwack, checked the weights, sniffed the flour, opened the back door without asking. Typical, just enough rudeness to remind the baker of his place. He left a slip of paper on the hook beside the calendar. A fine, again, for the drain not being covered. Even though it's never been covered. Even though it's not really a drain, just a crack where water runs into the dirt. He didn't argue. Arguing just makes them look harder. And the last thing he needs, another visit. Or worse, another shutdown. Let's talk about the mice. Yes, tiny thieves in the night. The baker has set traps. Not cruel ones, just little wooden snaps with breadcrumbs. But they're clever. Always are. Especially the gray one with the split tail. He's seen it dart across the floor like a streak of living smoke. It never touches the trap. Just stares. Almost like it's daring him. Some mornings the baker leaves a corner of crust near the fireplace, and it's always gone by the time the sun peeks through the soot-streaked window. He doesn't tell anyone, not even Thomas. Let the little creature eat. There's enough suffering in this place without chasing after scraps. Now, let's float toward the street, just for a moment. Watch the people. A girl with gloves too big for her fingers. A man coughing into a rag. A constable pacing slowly, nodding to no one. And there's the grocer, with oranges in the window. Bright little suns in a sea of gray. The baker hasn't had an orange in months. Too dear, too rare. But sometimes he dreams about them. The smell of peeling one. The oil spraying lightly. The sound of the skin tearing like soft leather. Yes, dreams. He gets so few of those anymore. The kind you remember when you wake up at least. But every now and then, a whiff of orange from the grocer's box brings it all back. Just for a breath or two. Let's return to the shop. The bell over the door gives a soft jingle. Someone's come in. A priest. Old. Heavy coat. Kind eyes. He doesn't say much. Just lays down a coin and points to the loaf he always buys. But today, he lingers. Looks around. Then offers the baker something small. A pamphlet. Folded neat. Inside, a recipe. From France. Something called pain d'épices, spice bread. With honey, clove, and a pinch of black pepper. The baker nods, thanks him softly. He won't make it. Not yet. The ingredients are far too expensive. But just having it, just knowing such a thing exists, it brings a kind of comfort. Like a warm letter from a distant cousin you've never met. It's midday now, and the warmth in the oven is starting to fade. The baker peeks inside, gives it another few pieces of coal, just enough to keep the crust golden. There's a rhythm to this life, a kind of heartbeat, soft, quiet, relentless. Bread rises, bread cools, bread goes out the door, and sometimes it gets eaten right away. Other times, it's traded. saved, shared, or even forgotten. But to the baker, every loaf means something. Every one is a line in a poem no one reads. He watches the girl come back this afternoon. The same one from the rain. Same bundle. But today, she brings a dried flower, pressed between cloth. It's brittle, fragrant, lavender maybe. She lays it down. He gives her 2 rolls again. Still no words. Just that same nod. Quiet as dusk. And when she leaves, he tucks the flower into his recipe book, next to a scrap of old newsprint with a drawing of a lamb on it. It's nearly dark now. Candles flicker. The street gaslights begin to glow. Soft yellow pools in a sea of charcoal. The last loaves are cooling on the counter. And the baker, he sits. Not often. But today, yes. He pulls the stool close to the fire, takes off one boot, stretches his toes toward the warmth, lets his eyes drift half shut. And for a moment, just a moment, it doesn't suck. For a breath's length, it's quiet, warm, and the world feels kind. Ah, it's quiet again. But not the comforting kind of quiet. More like the quiet of something waiting to break. You know that sound, don't you? Like when the wind presses against a window pane, but doesn't quite rattle it. Not yet. It's late evening in the bakery now. The sort of hour where the shadows start stretching out, reaching across the flour-covered floor, as if trying to dust their fingertips in white. The lamps flicker softly. Not bright. Never bright. Just enough to see the outlines of the wooden shelves, and the silent baskets that once held bread. They're empty now. Well, except for a crust here and there. The baker doesn't sweep it yet. Not until he's sure no one else is coming. Sometimes even after he closes the door and flips the sign, someone still knocks. A mother with wide eyes. A coughing man with a farthing. A child with a piece of string and hope. Let's go upstairs for a while. Up the narrow staircase behind the kitchen. The boards creak, softly, like old bones complaining. His room? It's not much. A low ceiling. A straw mattress tucked against the wall. 2 shirts hanging from a single nail. And a tiny wash basin that looks older than the bakery itself. But there's a window. Ah yes. A small square pane of glass smudged with years of breath and dreams. You can see the rooftops from here. Chimneys puffing out tired trails of smoke. Clotheslines fluttering like whispers. And the moon. Tonight she's shy. Just a sliver, peeking through a blanket of soot-gray clouds. The baker sits at the foot of his bed, removes his other boot, socks riddled with holes. He knows it's time to mend them. He even bought a needle last week. But the thread, well, that's still on his to-get list. Somehow that list keeps growing. While his patience, shrinks. He reaches beneath the bed, and pulls out a small wooden box. Locks click softly open. Inside, a collection of small things. Not valuable to others, but priceless in their own quiet way. There's a thimble from his mother. An old spoon with a bend in the handle, perfect for measuring sugar. A stub of chalk he once used to mark loaves for delivery. And a note. Yellowed, creased, barely legible. It's from his brother. Written during the war. Just a few lines. I dreamt of your bread last night. Still smells better than this mud. Keep baking, brother. I'll be home when the frost breaks. The frost did break, but his brother never came home. And yet, the baker still bakes. Every morning, every night, every breath in between. Use Holpetian. You know, not many people realize just how lonely this work is. People come in, they smile, they buy their loaf, they leave. But no one stays, no one asks. They smell the bread, but never the man. They see the flour, but not the calluses. They hear the crackle of a crust, but not the silence that fills the hours in between. Let's wander down to the oven again. Yes, even though it's dark now. The bricks still hold warmth. There's a glow in there, like a sleeping beast with embers in its belly. Sometimes he talks to it. Not aloud, just in his head. As if the oven listens better than most people do. As if it understands what it means to burn all day, and still not be seen. Tonight he tries something different. Just for himself. A roll with a touch of sugar. He had a little left from a cancelled order. He sprinkles it, slow, like snow falling on rooftops. Watches it melt into the dough. He shapes it by hand, carefully, gently, with the tenderness you'd give a newborn bird. And into the oven it goes. Only one roll. One small comfort. He watches it rise. And with it, his breath slows. His eyes soften. His shoulders sag in relief. Not everything needs to be sold. Some things are just for warmth. Just for now. There's a knock at the door. Not loud. Just tap. Tap. He wipes his hands, steps to the door, opens it just a crack. It's the boy from the street. The one with no shoes. He's holding something, wrapped in cloth. Looks like a button. Yes, a single brass button, polished to a glow. He offers it, silent, in return for a loaf. The baker pauses, looks at the child's thin arms, the hollows beneath his eyes. Then, he reaches over, takes a smaller loaf from the back shelf, hands it to the boy, keeps the button, not because it's worth much, but because it's worth everything in that moment. The boy leaves. No words, just a nod, always just a nod, like a secret language shared between those who know suffering. He places the button in the wooden box upstairs, right next to the spoon, closes it gently, locks it again, as if sealing in a bit of hope. Back downstairs. The roll is done now, golden, cracking just slightly on top. He breaks it open. Steam rises, carrying that smell, sweet, soft, home. He closes his eyes and takes a bite. It's the best thing he's eaten in weeks. Not because it's perfect, but because it's his. Made not for profit, not for praise, just for peace. The hours roll on. The fire dims. The lamps sputter. Outside the city sighs. Somewhere a dog barks once and falls silent. Somewhere else a cart rumbles over cobblestone. But here, inside the bakery, all is still. The only sound, who gave the world bread, and took only a button in return. And he will rise again tomorrow. As he always does. As he must. Because bakers, they don't chase dreams, they feed them, one crust at a time. Morning again. But you already knew that. The kind of morning that doesn't announce itself, just quietly appears, like breath on glass. The bakery is still dim, still silent, still wrapped in that sleepy veil of flour and ash. The baker is awake. Of course he is. He always is. Long before the streets stir, long before the roosters, even before the rats retreat to their holes. That's the thing about bakers. They belong to the dark hours, to the quiet space before the world begins again. He's kneading dough now. It's muscle memory at this point. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. The rhythm of survival. There's something meditative about it. Like prayer without words. Like breathing through your hands. His palms ache. His wrists crackle faintly when he rolls. But he keeps going. Always does. More. Let's pause a moment. Take in the smell. Flour, yeast, ash, and something sweet. Yes, a trace of syrup lingers from the roll he made last night. It's still in the tin near the window, half eaten. He didn't finish it. Too tired, too full of thoughts. But he left it there, uncovered, as if to say, yes, today might deserve something soft, too. Outside, the street is just beginning to stretch. The grocer's shutter creaks open. A milk cart rattles past. The clatter of hooves echoing down narrow lanes like impatient drumming. No one notices the baker. They never do. Not really. But if you could peek into their thoughts, just for a flicker, you'd find him there, in the comfort of their breakfast, in the warmth of their toast, in the bite of a morning roll shared over tired conversation. He's in their mouths, if not their minds. And isn't that something, to be forgotten, yet utterly essential? Let's talk about Thomas. Yes, his assistant. You remember him. Young, quiet, sleeves always too long. Today, he's late. Unusual. The baker checks the clock, then the door. Still nothing. He isn't angry, just worried. It's a feeling he tucks behind his apron, alongside every other quiet sorrow. Just as he's folding the last of the rye loaves, the door creaks open. Thomas enters, hair mussed, eyes red. No explanation, just a mumbled apology and a shrug. The baker doesn't press. He just hands the boy a cloth and gestures toward the counter. They work in silence. That kind of silence that holds weight, that says, I see it. I won't ask, but I'll stand beside you. As the sun rises, so do the smells. The bakery comes alive, slowly, like a church filling with light through stained glass. You can smell the brown loaves first, then the oat rounds, then the crusty white ones, with their dusting of fine flour, like snow caught in a dream. Each has its own scent, its own voice, its own story. He arranges them carefully, in the baskets, edges facing out, crusts not touching. There's a kind of pride here, not arrogance, just care, like tucking in a child before bed. A knock on the side door, not the main one, the side, the one for quiet business. He opens it. It's Mrs. Fenley, from the boarding house. She always comes early, always wants the day olds, says they're better for soaking. Today she has a bruise on her cheek. She doesn't mention it, and he doesn't ask. He just gives her 2 extra rolls, no charge. She nods. He nods, and the moment passes like steam seen then gone. Midday now. The shop is busy. Not bustling, but steady. A shoemaker buys a round and a half. 2 schoolboys scrape together pennies for a single crusty heel. A woman asks for bread with less judgment baked in. The baker doesn't flinch. He hands her a warm one from the back, softer than the others. She weeps a little, as she tucks it into her shawl. Sometimes bread is the only kindness a person meets in a day. There's an old man who always comes at noon, wears a bowler too big for his head, carries a copy of the Times, folded just so. Today he brings a joke, something about muffins and monks. The baker doesn't laugh aloud, but his eyes crinkle, and that's enough for both of them. Let's pause again. Step back from the counter. Look at him. Just look. The creases around his eyes, the flour dust in the folds of his collar, the callus on his thumb from slicing crusts. He's not handsome, not in the way stories like to tell it, but he's true, solid, steady, like a lamppost that never flickers, no matter the wind, that has its own kind of beauty. Evening now, again, shadows lengthen, the loaves thin out, and Thomas finally speaks. He says his mother is sick, that's why he was late. She coughed all night, didn't sleep. The baker nods, pulls a bundle from under the counter, a loaf, a roll, and a small jar of broth he'd kept for himself. He hands it over without a word. Thomas doesn't thank him, not with words, just eyes, moist, widened, then lowered again. Some things are too deep for language. As they clean the counters, the baker hums, a tune from long ago, a pub song maybe, or a lullaby. He doesn't remember the words, just the shape of them. Thomas hums along, off-key, but sincere. They sweep, they mop, they stack the unused baskets, and then, they sit, for just a minute. 2 men, shoulders bent, hands tired, hearts quietly burning. The lamp flickers, they light another, and for a moment, the room feels like a hearth, a place not of labor, but of living. The baker breaks the last piece of roll from last night, shares it with Thomas. Still sweet, still soft, still enough. And as the city exhales, in chimney smoke, and soft gaslight, and the hush of closing shutters, the bakery rests, and so does the baker, not because he's finished, but because the bread is done, and that's what matters. Tomorrow will come, it always does, and it will suck, it will ache, it will demand, but for now, for this one fleeting moment, there is warmth, there is stillness, and there is peace, wrapped gently in the crust of a loaf. Another night folds into another day. The embers have barely cooled from yesterday's fire, and already, the oven must wake again. The bakery doesn't sleep long. It can't, and neither does the baker. You might think that after so many mornings, he'd become numb to it. But no. Even now, his bones whisper to him before the light comes. A soft, dull reminder that the world still spins, and he's got work to do. He sits on the edge of the wooden stool for a moment. Just sits. Not thinking, not dreaming, just breathing. Sometimes, that's all he can afford. One breath at a time. The fire needs coaxing today. It didn't like the dampness in the air. Everything's a bit heavy. The bricks hold the cold longer. The coals are stubborn. Even the flint seems to take offense this morning. He tries again, and again. Tiny sparks hiss, catch, flicker. There it is. That first reluctant flame curling up like a cat disturbed. He smiles softly. Even the fire has moods. He mixes the flour with practiced precision. No measurements, just feeling. He knows exactly how heavy the scoop should be in his hand. Knows how the flour should fall. Like snow, but softer. Knows how the dough should resist. Just enough to push back, but not enough to break the wrist. That's what years do to you. They turn work into instinct. But instinct doesn't stop the pain, does it? It just teaches you how to move through it. Thomas arrives earlier today. Eyes clearer, back straighter. The baker notices, doesn't say anything, just nods, and passes him a damp cloth for the counters. Thomas takes it with both hands, wipes the surface with care. No conversation yet, but that's all right. Sometimes people speak best with what they do, not what they say. The first dough rises slower than usual. Maybe it's the cold, maybe it's the yeast, or maybe the dough just knows it's Monday. Even bread has a way of feeling things. The baker takes the bowl in both arms and brings it closer to the warmth of the oven, wraps it in cloth, talks to it softly under his breath. No real words, just sounds. A hum, a mutter, like a lullaby whispered to a restless child. That's how you treat dough, not as an ingredient, but as a guest, a creature, A living thing. Outside, the sky is still charcoal. No birds yet. No carts. Just silence thick enough to taste. He opens the window anyway. Lets the night breathe its last breath into the room. It smells of chimney smoke, damp stone, and the sweet tang of someone burning orange peels. 2 doors down. Old superstition. They say it keeps away sickness. Or ghosts. Or rats. Maybe all 3. Soon the first batch is ready. Brown rolls. Nothing fancy. Just honest bread. The kind that doesn't brag. The kind that stays quiet and fills you up. He lays them on the wooden rack, gently like setting down sleeping babies. And as steam rises, so does something else. A quiet sense of satisfaction. Small, but real. Around this hour, the delivery boy arrives. Samuel. About 12. Wears shoes with holes at the toes, and a scarf too long for his neck. But his eyes are sharp. Quick. He takes the baskets, 2 for the tavern, 1 for the church, and disappears down the alley. No words, just a nod. The baker watches him go. Wonders how someone so small can carry so much. But then again, he's been asking himself the same question in the mirror for 20 years. Now comes the part he hates, the account book. He never liked numbers. He's not stupid, just weary. It's one thing to wake before dawn and knead a dozen loaves. It's another to sit down and calculate why the flour costs more this week. He scratches notes in the margins, crosses out a few, tries again. Sometimes he cheats a little, rounds things off. Not to be dishonest, just to stay sane. Because numbers don't care if your back hurts, or if a customer didn't pay yesterday, or if the chimney leaked last night and ruined a sack of rye. Numbers are cruel. He prefers bread. Thomas sneezes. Twice. The baker looks over. The boy wipes his nose on his sleeve, embarrassed. The baker disappears into the back room and returns with a scrap of wool cloth. Old, but warm. He tosses it to the boy without a word. Thomas smiles, not with his mouth, but with the corners of his eyes. They say more than enough. Today a girl comes in. Maybe 10, 11. Skinny. Hair pulled back with string. She has 2 coins. Wants the smallest loaf, but stands there too long, looking, not at the bread, at the jam rolls. The ones with sugar sprinkled like frost. He tells her to pick one. She stares. Just take one. She does. Eyes wide. Fingers trembling. Says thank you. And runs out before he can say anything else. He sighs. Shakes his head. And smiles. Just a little. Later, around midday, the inspector comes. Black hat. Thick mustache. Clipboard in hand. Same one as last month. He sniffs the air like a dog. Pokes at the loaves with a gloved finger. Checks the firewood. Asks if he's using alum again. He isn't. Never did. Not like the others. He bakes honest. Hard, yes. But clean. Still, the inspector leaves a fine. Something about flour weight. Unclear rule. Unclear logic. But what can he do? He signs the paper. Tucks it in the drawer. Adds another number to his list of losses. One more thing to think about tonight. Thomas offers to fix the broken shelf near the window. He's good with tools. Better than expected. The baker watches. Lets him work. Hands him a nail here. A cloth there. They don't talk. Just move in quiet tandem. Like 2 hands of the same clock. Evening arrives. As always. Shadows creep up the walls like slow ink. The city begins to settle into itself. Gas lamps flicker. Horse hooves echo less urgently now. People pass by without looking in. But the bakery's light remains. Steady. Warm. Like a tiny hearth in a world too often cold. He bakes 2 extra rolls. One for Mrs. Fenley. One for the girl with the string in her hair. Just in case she comes back. She doesn't. But he sets it aside anyway. Hope has a shelf of its own. Thomas asks a question. Did you always want to be a baker? The baker chuckles. Softly. Never thought about it. I just kept waking up early. That's the truth of it. Sometimes you don't choose the work. Sometimes the work chooses you. Like a dog that follows you home. Like a fire that never stops needing wood. The dough for tomorrow is already proofing. Covered with cloth. Resting. Waiting. Like a promise you haven't spoken yet. He tightens the shutters. Checks the fire. Wipes his hands one last time. Then sits. Again. Same stool. Same corner. Different ache. But also, a mom. A quiet sort of peace. The kind that doesn't shout. Just hums in your bones. Like the memory of a lullaby. Or the last warmth of a crust shared between tired hands. And as the night folds once more, around the bakery, he closes his eyes. Not to sleep. Just to rest. To feel the weight of the day settle and soften. Like dough in the hands. Like hearts over time. And outside, London breathes. There's a different kind of silence tonight. Not the usual hush of bread sleeping under cloth. or the thick stillness of flour settling in sacks. No. This silence feels curious. It listens back, like the walls have ears, or the oven dreams. The baker opens the back door and steps into the alley. Just for a moment. He needs air, not the flour-heavy air of the shop, but the cold honesty of London's back lungs. He leans against the doorway, the bricks rough against his shoulder. Rain has passed recently. The cobblestones are slick, glittering faintly beneath the faint gaslight spill. A cat slinks by without a sound. No meow, no glance, just shadow. Even the cats know their way here. They can smell the yeast and the truth. Inside, Thomas is quietly shaping the rolls. The boy has a rhythm now. Soft palms, even pressure. Not too tight, not too loose. It took weeks to get here, but now he doesn't fight the dough anymore. He listens to it, learns from it, and somehow, the dough listens back. Good, the baker says, quietly. No need for praise, just recognition, just presence. Thomas looks up and smiles, just barely, then keeps working. Today is Thursday. He always bakes 2 rye loaves on Thursdays for Mr. Chalk, the widower who walks with a cane made from an old broom handle. Chalk doesn't speak much, just points, pays in coins rubbed smooth as river pebbles, never asks for change, never lingers, but he always comes, and always leaves one of the loaves on the doorstep of No 117 on the way home. A house where no one lives anymore. People do strange things in this city, but bread understands, bread accepts. There's a knock at the front, strange for this hour, not quite morning, not quite night, just between. The baker wipes his hands, opens the door. It's a woman, wrapped in a shawl so thick it hides most of her face. She looks tired, not in a loud way, in the way of someone who's held too many things too long. Please, she says. Just that. He gestures to the rack, points at a simple brown loaf. She nods. He wraps it, offers it gently. She leaves 2 coins, and a small blue ribbon on the counter, just walks away. He picks up the ribbon. It's silk, clean, maybe a child's. He places it on the shelf beside the matches and the rusty tin of buttons no one ever claims. Every bakery has its little altar of forgotten things. Later, the chimney begins to act up again. Smoke curls where it shouldn't. The oven huffs like an old man with tired lungs. The baker climbs the narrow wooden ladder and lifts the roof hatch. A cold wind slaps his face immediately. The city looks different from here. Grayer, flatter, like it's waiting for someone to tuck it in. He squints at the chimney mouth. There's a nest again. Birds, stubborn creatures. He nudges it gently with a broom, not to destroy, just to shift. A few twigs fall, a feather, and then the smoke flows freer. Better. Back to work. Thomas has stacked the trays with more care now. He's using the side rack, something the baker had told him to do before, but the boy had forgotten. Not tonight. Tonight everything is exactly where it should be. Almost. A strange smell begins to drift. Not burnt, not spoiled, just wrong. He follows it to the back room. And there it is. A sack of flour has split. A small trail of black, rat droppings. Tiny teeth marks on the corner. The baker sighs. Another loss. He pulls the bag aside, ties it off. He'll burn it later. Can't risk disease. Even one bit of tainted flour can ruin the whole shop. And the inspector, he'd shut the place without blinking. It's always a game of balance. Flour to water, heat to time, trust to risk. The baker replaces the sack with a fresh one. Double checks the lid. Sprinkles peppermint oil on the floor. An old trick to keep pests away. Does it work? Maybe, but doing something always feels better than doing nothing. Thomas asks, "Do you ever take a day off?" The baker chuckles, not loudly, more like a dusty breath escaping a worn book. "I once took a whole afternoon. What happened? Got bored." They both laugh, softly, quiet enough that the laughter stays in the room, doesn't leak out. A child walks in just before dusk, a boy this time, muddy boots, one eye swollen, carrying a tin cup. Says his mum, needs stale crusts for stew. The baker nods, doesn't ask questions, hands over a bag with yesterday's edges, adds a single sweet roll on top. Just because. The boy blinks at him, then leaves. That's all. The sky goes lavender now, that strange lovely in-between color, like bruises with dignity. The baker leans against the counter, hands covered in flour, one thumb bleeding a little from a crack in the skin. But he doesn't notice, doesn't need to. Pain becomes part of the background here, like the ticking of a crooked wall clock. He remembers something suddenly, an old recipe, his grandfather's, almond bread with rosewater glaze. He hasn't made it in years. He looks around, checks the jars. Yes, still some almonds. Still a bottle of rose water tucked behind the barley. Why not? Just one batch. Not for sale, just for remembering. Thomas watches him measure the almonds. Chop them finely. Toast them gently. Mix the glaze like a potion. Special order? He asks. No, says the baker. Just ghosts. Thomas doesn't ask what that means. Smart boy. Some recipes aren't for profit. They're for quiet conversations with the past. The almond loaves come out golden, crusted just right, fragrant. The smell pulls at something older than memory. Something from when he was small. Knees on a stool. Watching a pair of wrinkled hands tie twine around warm loaves. He slices one. Takes a bite. Closes his eyes. Still right. Still perfect. Still home. He gives the other loaf to Thomas. You earned this. The boy holds it like a book he's afraid to open. Really, go on. He does. And the smile that comes isn't wide or loud, but it's full, like a window opening in a stuffy room. The smell of almonds and smoke hangs in the air like a lullaby. And outside, London yawns. Somewhere a bell rings. Somewhere else a baby cries. And here, bread cools, and cools, and waits. The baker finally removes his apron, brushes his hands clean. One last check of the window latch. One last glance at the oven's glow. Thomas curls on the bench near the fire, loaf beside him, blanket over his knees, asleep. The baker smiles, shakes his head, turns down the lamp, and whispers, "See you in the morning." And with that, the bakery falls silent, but not empty. Never empty. Not while bread still dreams, and flour still remembers the hands that shaped it. Ah, it's morning now, but not the bright cheerful kind with sunbeams and songbirds. No, this is the London kind of morning, heavy, gray, and just slightly damp, like the city hasn't fully decided to wake up yet. Inside the bakery, the oven still holds some of the night's warmth. Not much, just enough to soften the cold. The baker stretches his fingers, stiff from rest, if you could call it that. Sleep is never deep here. Not in this life. Not when the yeast keeps rising and the chimney keeps huffing and the flour keeps shifting in its sack like it's alive. He checks the schedule. Ah, market day, which means more batches, more mouths, more weight on his shoulders. But he doesn't complain. The baker never complains. Just moves, like a clock. One with no hands, just the steady ticking of habit. Thomas is already up, already folding the cloths, already setting out the trays. The boy is learning, faster than expected. He's not clumsy anymore. His hands remember what his eyes used to forget. The baker gives him a glance, a small nod, and that's enough. Today's list includes brown loaves, milk rolls, and 4 dozen cottage buns for the stalls. Cottage buns always take more time, not because the dough is trickier, but because the shape matters. They must look nice, soft dome on top, snug little belly underneath. People judge with their eyes before they ever bite. Even in the poorest corners of London, they still want the bun to look like it was made with care. There's a rhythm to the shaping. Pinch, fold, press, roll, turn, pat. Again and again. The baker lets his thoughts wander while his fingers move. They often do. Once, years ago, he delivered buns to a hospital ward. Children's wing. Tiny faces. Big eyes. No sound. Just the quiet rustle of sheets and the low moans of beds that didn't want to hold sick bodies anymore. He remembered a girl, maybe 6. Hair falling out in patches. But her smile, it stayed with him. She held that bun like it was a jewel. Bit it slowly, reverently, like it mattered. That day, the baker made buns extra sweet. No one asked him to, but something told him to do it. Sometimes, sugar is medicine. Back in the present, Thomas hums softly. Just a simple tune, one his mother used to sing. Or maybe he's making it up. Either way, the sound drifts through the air like steam. The kind of sound that makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, today won't be so bad. The door creaks open, a little early for customers. But this face isn't new. It's Mr. Fenwick, the clock repairman. He smells of oil and dust and cold brass, leaves his coat buttoned even indoors. He doesn't speak much, just nods, points to the usual. 2 plain rolls and 1 treacle twist. Today he adds something unexpected. Bad week, he mutters, then drops an extra coin on the counter. The baker nods back, adds a shortbread for free. They never say more. That's their way. 2 men, 1 language, all silence. The baking continues. Steam rises, dough sings. Thomas stubs his thumb on the rack and swears under his breath. The baker raises an eyebrow. The boy looks guilty. Then they both laugh. Not loud, not long, just enough to shake the dust off the mood. The milk has turned sour. He sniffs the jug, winces. Down the drain it goes. He makes a mental note. Visit the dairy afternoon. Old Mrs. Grace runs it now. She's nearly blind, but still measures better than most. Her cows are clean, and she always wraps the jugs in muslin that smells of lavender. Somehow, that makes the bread taste better. Even if it doesn't, he opens the side door to let the morning air in. It's still gray outside, but lighter now. Someone's whistling down the lane. A cart creaks by. And somewhere, faintly, a dog barks 3 times. Everything feels ordinary, which is rare and precious. He stirs the next batch, the rye loaves. Thicker, heavier dough, harder to work with, but worth it, especially for the regulars who swear it helps their digestion. Mr. Dolan says it keeps the devils in his stomach quiet. Mrs. Penrose eats hers toasted, dipped in vinegar, which makes no sense, but she insists it's divine. The baker doesn't question it. He just makes the bread. Suddenly, a sound, not loud, but odd, a shuffling at the back. Thomas freezes. The baker wipes his hands and walks slowly to the rear, checks the crates, listens. There, a faint squeak, then a rustle. Arm. Not rats this time. He looks closer. A bird. Trapped. Tiny thing. Suit dark wings, caught in the flour sack netting. He moves carefully. Doesn't speak. Doesn't rush. Untangles it gently. Lets it go. The bird doesn't hesitate. Just lifts off and vanishes through the open roof vent. Gone. Thomas peeks in. What was it? Messenger, says the baker. Then goes back to kneading. No one knows what he meant, but somehow, it feels true. The buns are cooling now, lined up like sleepy heads on a pillow. He dusts them lightly with sugar, then lets them rest. Everything needs rest, even bread, especially bread. Thomas wipes the counters without being told, checks the paper bags, prepares the change box. He's becoming a real baker now. Not just with his hands, with his eyes, his ears. He notices things, like when the dough is too quiet, or when the fire doesn't crackle right, or when someone needs a loaf, but doesn't have the words to ask. That's what real baking is. Not flour, not fire, but noticing. A small girl comes in just before 10. She has a doll made from rags. No shoes. She places a single farthing on the counter. Doesn't speak, just looks at the baker with wide, expectant eyes. He reaches behind the tray, finds the smallest roll. Still warm, wraps it gently, places it in her hands. She beams, not with teeth, just with heart, and skips out the door. Thomas watches. What if she does it every day? Then we'll be ready. The boy nods, no argument. He gets it now. It's not about what people pay. It's about what they carry. The chimney coughs again. Time to clean it. Not today though. Maybe tomorrow. Always tomorrow. That's the rhythm of a baker. There's always one more task. Always one more batch. Shelves almost bare. Even the air feels used up. The baker sits at the wooden stool behind the counter. Sips the last of the cold tea. Lets it sit on his tongue before swallowing. Bitter, but real, and that's enough. Thomas starts reading from a crumpled paper tucked in his apron. A story. Something about ships and storms. The boy's voice is soft, steady, like kneading words into dough. And the baker listens, eyes closed, not to sleep, just to rest, letting the day bake itself into memory. The bun crumbs on the floor, the half smile from the girl, the way the fire flickered at just the right time, the sound of that bird flying free, all of it folded into this day like raisins in sweet bread. Nothing wasted, nothing too small. The light fades, London dims, and once again, the bakery waits, quiet, worn, but warm, like it always was, like it always will be. It's evening now, that in-between time, when the street lamps haven't yet bloomed, but the sky is already dimming into ink. Inside the bakery, the last heat from the oven lingers, soft like an old blanket. Not much light anymore, just the flicker of a stubby candle on the counter, and the amber glow leaking from the coals. Thomas sits on the floor, back against a flour sack, eyes half-lidded, not from sleep, but from a kind of peaceful weariness. The kind only a full day of honest work can bring. The baker, meanwhile, is counting crates. His fingers brush along the wood. 1, 2, 3, 4. He doesn't really need to count them. He knows, but it's the ritual. Rituals matter here, not for efficiency, but for comfort. He remembers something. There's still the grain order to check. Tomorrow, if the wind behaves, the dockers will deliver 2 sacks of barley and 1 of oats. Different grain means a different texture, a different rise, a different story to each loaf. Victorian bakers weren't always trusted. Back then bread was political, even dangerous. Did you know, some bakers cut their flour with chalk or sawdust just to stretch a penny farther? They thought it was clever, but the people knew. The bread tasted strange, the crust crumbled wrong, the heart of the loaf felt hollow. People notice when bread loses its soul. But our baker? He never cheated. Not once. Even when times got rough. Even when the flour ran low, and the customers paid late. He believed in honest bread. Bread that rose slowly, like a sunbeam. Bread that fed not just the belly, but something softer. He walks to the little window, wipes the condensation with the side of his palm. The street is empty now. Just fog curling at the edges, like sleepy fingers. He hears a far-off whistle. A man's tune. Probably a night watchman beginning his rounds. Or a chimney sweep, heading home with soot in his boots. Thomas has fallen asleep now. His hand still rests on the edge of a linen cloth, like he was folding it, and simply paused forever. The baker doesn't wake him. Instead, he places an old wool blanket over the boy's legs. Just so. He remembers being that age. His first master was named Cray, an angry man, fast hands, cold oven. The boy, our baker, burned his fingers once on a pan left too long. Cray had laughed, said now you'll remember. But he didn't learn to fear the heat. No, he learned to listen to it, understand it. It was Cray's cruelty that taught him patience. Isn't that strange? How even bitterness can become fuel. He returns to the table and begins writing the next day's list in a small smudged notebook. It's barely legible, but to him, it makes perfect sense. There's a section for rolls, one for loaves, one for extras, whatever that means. He knows, the extras are always the things people didn't ask for, but needed. Like the bun for the girl with no shoes, or the soft heel for the widow who lost her appetite. The bakery has always been more than a shop. It's a sanctuary, even if it doesn't look like one. Even if the roof leaks sometimes, and the windows rattle, and the broom never finds all the crumbs. It's still holy, in its own way. Bread has always been sacred, even when it's humble. A soft knock breaks the quiet. Strange. This late? The baker walks to the door, and opens it just enough. A man stands there, hunched, with a battered hat in his hands. He smells of damp wool and desperation. He doesn't speak, just holds out a worn paper slip. The baker reads it by candlelight. A food chit. Issued by the parish. Valid for 1 loaf plain. No butter. No extras. But the baker doesn't pause. He nods. Takes the chit. Goes to the back. Chooses a crusty brown loaf, still warm. Wraps it. Adds a small twist of sugar at the bottom of the paper, where no one can see. Hands it over without a word. The man bows, awkwardly, and disappears into the fog. Thomas stirs. Who was that? No one, says the baker softly. But his eyes say everything. The night deepens. It carries a kind of hush now. The kind that presses against your skin, like time has stopped moving, just for a moment. He sits again, this time with an old book in his lap. Not a ledger, not a recipe, a storybook. Fairy tales from the hearth, it says. The cover is cracked, but the pages are whole. He opens to a random page, begins to read silently. Just to pass time, but Thomas's voice breaks the stillness. Out loud, he whispers, "Please." The baker smiles, clears his throat, and begins. Once in a land of ever winter, there lived a girl who could hear bread rise. Thomas's eyes widen. He leans forward. The candle flickers. The bakery becomes something else. Somewhere else. The walls fade. The soot softens, and the tale carries them both away. But she hears the dough, knows its heartbeat. One night she shapes a loaf shaped like the moon. And when it bakes, her curse breaks. The whole village eats the bread, and their memories return. They remember laughter. They remember love. They remember warmth. It's a silly story, but something about it feels real. Because sometimes, bread does bring people back. The baker closes the book, doesn't say anything. Neither does Thomas. They just sit there, together. Not talking, not moving. Just letting the quiet settle like powdered sugar on a cooled bun. Outside, the street lamp flickers. Inside, the coals sigh. And somewhere between the flicker and the sigh, another day ends. But the work never really ends, does it? Tomorrow will come. The oven will groan. The yeast will bubble. The world will wake, hungry again. And the baker, he'll be ready, with flour on his sleeves, and hope in his hands. You ever notice how silence at night has its own shape? Not flat, not empty, but round and slow, and curled up like a sleeping cat on the windowsill. That's the kind of silence in the bakery right now. The kind that hums beneath your skin. It's early, far too early for morning, but the baker is already up. His bones know the hour before the clock does. He moves slowly, doesn't light a lamp yet, just lets the low orange glow from the coal oven guide his feet across the cold stone floor. Every step makes a sound. Not a creak, more like a hush, like the floor remembers him. He opens the back door just enough to let in the outside air. It's damp tonight. London fog, thick as soup, hanging low like it doesn't want to leave. He takes a breath, slow and shallow. There's a certain peace in standing still when the whole world is quiet, even if just for a second. But peace is never long in a bakery. The dough from yesterday needs checking. He lifts the cloth. A soft puff of yeasty warmth rises. Good. Risen just right. You can tell by the way the top shimmers slightly, like it's breathing. Dough is alive, you know. Not just a thing, it grows, sighs, stretches, it waits for you to listen. He punches it down gently, not violently, letting out all the tiny sighs it's been holding inside. Then he begins rolling, kneading, folding, not with speed, but with rhythm. A dance between tired hands and soft grain. There's something comforting about repetition. Same motion, same result, same smell, same ache in the wrists, but comforting, still. The boy Thomas wakes soon after. He rubs his eyes, hair sticking up like a startled hedgehog. The baker doesn't say anything, just nods toward the wooden bowl and leaves a small roll on a cloth beside it. Thomas grins, still warm, still soft, still real. They don't speak much in the mornings. Words feel too heavy. Instead they hum sometimes, little melodies with no name. A song the baker's mother might have sung once. He can't remember. Or maybe he made it up. Either way, it works. The baker has a scar on the back of his left hand. It's thin and pink and runs like a crooked road across the skin. He got it years ago, during the flour riots. You ever heard of those? Most haven't. But they were real. Londoners once grew so desperate, so hungry, that they stormed bakeries, demanded loaves, even if it meant taking them with fists. He didn't fight back, just handed them the bread. But someone panicked, a knife flashed, and the scar stayed. It doesn't ache anymore, but it remembers. Back to work. The shop bell rings. Already, too early. The baker peeks through the curtain. A woman stands outside. Not a customer, he knows. She wears no shoes. Her shawl is too thin, and her hands are wrapped in newspaper. She's holding something. A bundle, wrapped in cloth. The baker opens the door, doesn't speak, just waits. She holds out the bundle. It's a baby. Tiny, too small for this cold. She doesn't say much. Only please. The baker stares at her, at the child, then at Thomas, then back again. He doesn't ask questions, only nods once, takes the baby gently. The woman doesn't linger. She walks away into the fog, swallowed whole, just like that, gone. Inside, he wraps the baby in warm linen, and places them by the oven wall. Safest spot in the shop, steady heat, no drafts. Thomas watches quietly. You gonna keep her? The baker doesn't answer. He simply begins kneading again, with the same rhythm, same pressure, as though nothing happened. But his shoulders sit heavier now. By noon the shop begins to stir. 2 customers. An older man with rheumy eyes, who buys the same rye loaf every Wednesday, and a girl with red ribbons in her hair. She's never bought anything before, just presses her nose against the glass. Today though, she has coins, clutched so tightly her fingers have turned white. The baker serves her a honey roll, adds a small piece of plum tart without charging. She smiles like the sun cracked open her whole world, then runs off down the street. Sweet moments, even in sour times. The baby is quiet all day, sleeping mostly, no name yet. The baker hasn't given her one. Maybe he's waiting for her to tell him. Or maybe he's afraid to name something that could still be taken away. There's a knocking around 2 o'clock. Hard, sharp, official. Thomas tenses. The baker sighs. Opens the door. A man in a dark coat stands there. Parish inspector. He smells like ink and authority. Looks down his nose and inside the shop. Asks questions. Too many. Where's your assistant's license? How much flour do you claim per week? Why is there an infant in your shop? The baker answers softly, calmly. He's been through this before. The inspector leaves eventually. Not satisfied but unable to prove anything either. Thomas exhales. The baby sleeps on. Another storm passed. Another brick added to the weight on his shoulders, but he keeps kneading. Always kneading. That night they don't eat much. Just broth and bread. The baker eats standing up. Thomas on a stool. The baby in a crate filled with cloth. They don't talk. Just chew slowly, listen to the fire. Let the silence curl around them again. You see, it sucked to be a baker in Victorian England, not because of the flour, not the burns, not the endless waking hours, or the coal-smudged lungs, but because of everything else. The responsibility, the impossible decisions. Who gets bread? Who doesn't? When do you say no? What do you risk by saying yes? You're not just making loaves, you're holding pieces of people's lives in your hands, every single day. And yet, he never stops. Never once considered closing the shutters. He keeps rising before the sun. Keeps kneading, folding, rising, baking, because somewhere out there, just beyond the fog, someone still needs bread, and someone else still remembers what it means to be given a crust, without asking. So he bakes, and the baby sleeps, and Thomas watches, and the oven hums, always. The morning fog doesn't lift anymore. It just sort of melts into the air inside. The windows are too soot-stained to notice anyway. But the baker knows. The light is different. More silver than gold now. He stirs beneath his wool blanket, already awake, though his body doesn't want to move. The baby's little breaths puff from the bread basket beside the oven. Thomas is curled up with a flour sack under his head, fast asleep. He rises, slowly, carefully, like waking up without waking the world. Today's a delivery day. That means loading the wooden cart with enough loaves to feed half the parish. It's heavy work, but the baker doesn't complain. He never does. His hands have memorized the weight of hardship. He ties the twine around the waxed paper carefully, double knotting each one. Not for neatness, no, for dignity. There's something beautiful about a loaf that's been wrapped with care, even if the person receiving it has nothing left, especially then. Outside, the cobbled streets are wet from last night's mist. The wheels of the cart squeak softly as they roll across the stones. The baby is wrapped and tucked into a sling across the baker's chest. Yes, he wears her now as he walks. His coat buttoned around them both. She doesn't cry, just looks out with curious eyes. Eyes that haven't seen the cruelty yet. Eyes full of sleep and soot-light. They reach the first house, a red door with peeling paint. He knocks gently. Once, twice. An old woman opens it. Doesn't speak, just hands him 2 buttons and a small bundle of dried lavender. Barter. No coins anymore, but lavender keeps the rats away, so it'll do. He leaves her a small rye and half a sugar bun. She weeps softly behind the door. Next, the miller's family. They still have coin but not much else. Their flour sacks have grown thin. Strange irony, the miller can't afford bread. The baker takes no payment today. He just hands them a full sourdough, and turns without a word. He knows how quickly pride can collapse under the weight of hunger. As they go door to door, more trades happen. A child gives him a cracked whistle in exchange for a stale crust. Another man, drunk, staggering, offers a copper brooch, swearing it was his mother's. The baker takes it, not because he wants it, but because refusing would crush what little dignity the man has left. Thomas, now tagging along, keeps a small notebook. He writes down every trade, every face, every debt. They're not businessmen, but there's a kind of quiet honesty in knowing who owes what, even if it's never repaid. At midday they stop by the churchyard. There's a funeral, small, 6 people maybe, no priest, just a boy saying a prayer he barely remembers. The baker watches from a distance. He places a fresh roll under a stone near the gate. It's for the gravekeeper. He always watches out for thieves and rats, the silent allies of every baker. By now the sun has climbed high. Its warmth isn't real though, just light without heat. The kind that makes shadows longer but never softer. The baby stirs, not crying, just murmuring, like a kettle before the boil. Back in the shop, the smells return all at once. Stale yeast, warm crust, wood smoke, and something sweet lingering from yesterday's tart. The baker rests his cart against the door and stretches his back. Bones pop softly. He winces, but says nothing. Pain is part of the apron now. Inside, the radio crackles. Not music, just static. He keeps it on for the noise. Reminds him that something's still moving in the world beyond this block. Thomas puts water on to boil. No tea, just hot water. But it's something. They sit in silence, sipping steam. The baby sleeps, and the light outside begins to fade again. Evening is when the real work starts. More dough, more folding, more waiting. Everything repeats, like a lullaby that never ends. Tonight, the baker tries something new. He adds molasses to the crust. A touch sweeter, easier to chew. For the children, he thinks. Or maybe, he looks down at the sleeping baby, who now shifts slightly, one tiny hand curling around a bit of frayed thread in his coat. He thinks of names, not grand ones, not royal, just soft names, like Ellie, or Fern, something quiet. He hasn't decided yet. As night deepens, a knock sounds again, this one sharp, urgent. 3 constables in gray coats step into the shop. They bring wind and authority with them. They don't wait to be welcomed. They ask about loaves gone missing from the warehouse, 2 streets over. Someone said they saw a baker. The baker doesn't lie. He simply stares. Lets the silence speak. Thomas begins to tremble. The constables don't stay long. They don't find anything. Just flour and babies and tiredness. But one says, on the way out, don't push your luck. We're watching. The baby cries for the first time. A sharp wailing sound that cuts through the coals. The baker rocks her gently. Murmurs something that's not really words. Thomas locks the door behind them. Another storm passed. Another scar added to a place no one can see. They don't sleep much that night. The oven flickers. The bread rises. Time melts quietly into another day. You see, being a baker in Victorian England wasn't just about waking up early and feeding the hungry. It was about choosing who gets to feel human, and who has to beg for it. It was about turning dough into dignity, and ashes into warmth, and silence into survival. He doesn't ask for praise, or recognition. Only for enough flour to keep going, enough warmth to keep her asleep, and enough time to see the morning without losing a part of himself. The lamp flickers gently on the wall, the wick's nearly gone. But there's just enough light to see the flour drifting through the air like soft, tired snow. The baker doesn't speak tonight. Not because he's angry, or sad. Just tired. Tired in a way that presses behind the eyes and settles into the knees. Thomas is in the back, washing the same pan for the 3rd time. He scrubs like the grime is personal, like it insulted him. He hums softly, a tune without words, something his mother might have sung, though he doesn't remember the words. Outside, the world moves on. The church bell hasn't rung in 3 days. People say the ringer fell ill, or left, or froze in his sleep. No one's quite sure, but the silence it leaves is heavy. Tonight, the baker tries something different. He opens an old jar tucked at the very back of the cupboard. Cardamom, a spice he's been saving. Rare, expensive, but tonight feels like a night for remembering better days. He adds a pinch into a small batch of dough, closes his eyes, and lets the scent bring him back. Ah, there it is, a memory, flickering like the flame on the lantern. He's 10 years old again, standing beside his father in the workshop. His father's voice is low, calm, guiding. You fold it like this, he'd say. Not because it's faster, but because it's kinder to the dough. Kinder to the dough. That stuck with him. Funny how even now, with the world unraveling thread by thread, he still folds dough gently. There's a quiet knock at the side door. It's not a customer. No one comes this late. He hesitates, then answers. It's Elsie, the chimney sweep's wife. She's soaked to the bone, hair clinging to her cheeks, a bruise beneath her eye. No words, just tears. He lets her in, wraps a shawl around her shoulders, gives her a seat near the oven. No questions asked. No judgment. This isn't rare anymore. People with nowhere to go, coming to the baker's warmth like moths to flame. Thomas hands her a warm roll. She eats it slowly, eyes staring at nothing. The baby watches from her cradle, tiny fists waving gently at the shadows on the wall. She's grown. Not much, but her cheeks are rounder now, her hair thicker. She smiles more, even if it's just in dreams. The baker doesn't say much, just keeps working. The cardamom loaves are done, golden, fragrant. He places them on the windowsill to cool, even though no one's likely to buy them tonight. Sometimes, he just needs to make something beautiful, just for the sake of it. The rain starts again, heavy, persistent. It taps against the window like a polite warning from the sky. Water always finds a way in, through the roof, under the door, into the soul. Later that night, Thomas asks about the spice. Why use it now, he says, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The baker shrugs. No reason, or maybe every reason. He remembers a time when spices meant celebration. Now, they just mean memory. Elsie's asleep near the oven, wrapped in old blankets. The baby sleeps too, her small chest rising with slow, careful breaths. Thomas is cleaning up quietly, eyes half closed. The baker, he's still working, still folding, still watching the clock tick past 2. He pauses and goes to the corner drawer, pulls out an envelope. It's faded, creased. Inside, an old letter from someone he once loved, written in neat, slanted handwriting. He reads it again. The words don't change, but they feel different every time. I hope your bread still makes people smile, it says. I hope you still laugh when the dough sticks to your fingers. I hope you're still kind. I'm kind. That word again. Not strong, not smart, just kind. He folds the letter back and places it beside the lamp. It smells faintly of rosewater now, mixed with the spices in the air. Under the floorboards, he sighs. Not rats again. He stomps gently near the corner. The noise stops. He chuckles, barely. Even they're looking for warmth now, he mutters. Morning comes slowly. The sky turns from pitch to pewter. Not golden, not soft, just awake. Elsie is gone. Left a scarf behind. And a note. Thank you, you saved more than me. He folds it. Adds it to the drawer with the letter. Maybe one day he'll burn them both. Maybe not. The baby wakes, gurgling softly. Thomas stirs in his cot. And the baker moves to the table once more. Starts mixing a new batch. No rest. Not today. Maybe not ever. But this time he hums. Low. Barely audible. A tune that's not quite sad, and not quite hopeful. Just something in between. Like the space between night and dawn. He wipes his hands on his apron. Kneels beside the cradle. And whispers something to the baby. Not loud. Not urgent. Just, I'm still here. The dough rises slowly in the bowl. Like hope, he thinks. Heavy, fragile, and alive. The morning arrives. But without the brightness you'd expect. It's not golden. Not lively. It's gray. Thin like fog pulled from a tired dream. The kind of morning where time feels like it's barely moving. And everything sounds like it's coming through a woolen cloth. Thomas is still half asleep, hunched over a bench with dough stuck to his cheek. The baby's soft cooing fills the room like the song of a kettle right before it boils. The baker stirs the embers in the oven. No flames, just warmth. That's enough for now. He didn't sleep, of course. Not last night, not really the night before, but he stopped counting. At some point the exhaustion just becomes a part of the skin, like soot in the wallpaper, or yeast in the cracks of the wood. Today is market day. That used to mean something. Used to be a swirl of voices, baskets swinging, smells of roasted chestnuts, and horse dung and fresh fish packed in salt. Now it's slower, more desperate. People come with smaller coins and bigger eyes. They don't browse. They beg with glances. And the baker, he does what he can, but he has limits too. Before heading to the stall, he lays out the loaves. 6 brown, 2 cardamom from the leftover dough. 3 misshapen ones. He calls them accidents, though they're more like experiments. And 4 tiny rolls, too small to sell, but not small enough to waste. He wraps them in muslin and puts them aside. Quiet charity for little hands later. The streets are damp. The fog clings to his coat like cold breath. He pushes the cart slowly, wooden wheels creaking with every stone and rut. Thomas follows behind, carrying a smaller tray. He walks like he hasn't decided whether he's awake yet. The market square isn't really a square. It's more like a tangle of intentions. Someone's selling eels from a bucket. Someone else yells about soap. Another tries to hawk magic ink to children who don't know how to write. The baker sets up near the iron fence. Same spot every week. By the lamppost that leans like it's eavesdropping on the world. A woman stops by, thin, eyes like polished stones. She stares at the loaves longingly, fingers her empty coin purse. He hands her one of the tiny rolls. She doesn't speak, just nods once and walks away, chewing slowly. That happens 4 more times before noon. By then the cart is half empty, but the baker's pockets aren't much fuller. Still, he counts it a victory. He didn't come for profit. He came to feel useful. Thomas comes back with a grin. He sold a roll to a constable for a halfpenny more than the asking price. Because it was warm, he says proudly. The baker ruffles his hair. Warmth is rare. People pay for it when they can. A bell chimes across the square. Not a church bell. Not these days. It's the bell of the soup wagon. Charity or clever business. No one knows. But people line up anyway. The baker watches them quietly. He knows 3 of them, and they don't make eye contact. Afternoon turns to dusk. The sky bruises into purples and muddy blues. He packs up slowly. Thomas hums. The cart creaks home again, echoing off cobblestones that look like broken teeth. Back at the shop, the baby is asleep. Someone's left a jar of honey on the doorstep. No note, just the jar, half full, sealed with a scrap of waxed cloth. He takes it inside, places it on the shelf like treasure. Maybe it is. Tonight he doesn't bake, he just cleans. Not because the place is dirty, but because cleaning feels like control. The world can fall apart, but this surface will shine. This floor will be swept. These tools will be placed back exactly where they belong. Thomas sits on the floor beside the baby's cradle. He's telling her a story. Something about a horse with golden wings. She gurgles back in approval. He grins, and keeps going. The baker steps outside. Just for a moment. The air is cold, but still. The fog has lifted slightly, and for the first time in weeks, he can see stars. Not many, but enough. One's twinkling right above the chimney stack. He closes his eyes. Doesn't wish. Just breathes. He goes back inside. Puts the kettle on. Sits down at the bench. Takes out a small piece of paper, and writes a list. Bake before dawn. Check on Elsie. Patch the roof. Buy more cardamom, if possible. Look up sometimes. He chuckles at the last one. Not sure why he wrote it, but it stays. Thomas asks, "Do you miss it?" The baker looks up. Miss what? The time before. He thinks for a while, stirs his tea, finally says, "No. I miss the feeling of being enough." Thomas doesn't get it. Not yet. He will. Eventually. The baby whimpers in her sleep. The kettle hisses. The flame dances. And outside, a quiet snow begins to fall. Like flour from a sky-sized sieve. The baker doesn't speak. Doesn't smile. But his hands rest calmly on the table. Palm to palm. Like prayer, or perhaps just peace. He closes his eyes for a moment. Listens. Not to noise, but to the absence of it. The soft hush of things settling into place. The oven is dark tonight, but the warmth remains. Like memory. Like kindness. Like cardamom on a cold morning. The snow didn't stop overnight. It dusted the streets like powdered sugar. Soft. Quiet. Almost kind. But snow doesn't bring rest for a baker. It only brings slower footsteps, colder dough, and the wet that creeps up the hem of your trousers, and stays there like a warning. The baker wakes before light, again. Not because he wants to, because his back does, and once it starts to ache, there's no return to sleep. He sits at the edge of the bed for a long while, not thinking, not stretching, just being. He looks over at the little cradle. The baby's bundled like a bun, sleeping with a smile on her lips. Thomas is on the cot again, curled up like a cat, one foot sticking out from under the blanket. He always does that. The baker smiles faintly. That's warmth. That's a kind of victory. Downstairs, the embers in the oven are waiting. They've dimmed. Yes, but they're alive, like old friends who never leave. With a soft crack, he opens the iron door, adds a bit of coal, listens to the soft sigh of flame catching. There it is. The first sound of morning. Not a rooster, not a bell, but fire. Always fire. He begins the dough early. The big bowl is cold against his forearms. The flour falls like soft snowfall. The yeast hisses a little, as it stirs in the warm water. It smells alive. He adds salt, oil, mixes with strong, slow hands. There's something almost holy about this part. Like making something out of nothing. Bread really is that, isn't it? Hope, in a crust. Thomas wakes and joins him. No words at first, just yawns, rubs his eyes, stands next to the baker, and mimics the kneading. It's clumsy, but heartfelt. The dough doesn't care, neither does the baker. The rolls are shaped. Loaves too. He sprinkles them with oats this time. Found a jar in the back of the cupboard. Barely remembered it was there. It feels like finding coins in an old coat. He smiles. It's the little things. By midday, the snow is still falling, but thinner. The baker doesn't go to the square today. Instead, he opens the shutters and places the trays right at the front, letting the smell drift into the street. That's the best sign, he always says. The smell of baking. It pulls people better than a bell or a sign ever could. Mrs. Kettlesworth from 2 doors down knocks gently. She buys a half loaf, then leaves behind a scarf. For Thomas, she says. Too thin. The baker nods. Doesn't argue. Accepts kindness like dough accepts flour. Quietly, steadily. Later, a boy comes running. His shoes have holes. His hands are red with cold. But he has a copper penny in one, and an apple in the other. I'll trade, he says. The baker nods and hands him 2 rolls. That apple will be for the baby later. Sweetness, afternoon fades quickly in winter. By 4 o'clock, the sky is already yawning into purple. Inside, the baker and Thomas clean the boards, dust the counter, tie up the sacks. They don't speak much. They don't need to. Thomas asks a quiet question. Were you always a baker? The baker pauses, wipes his hands. Then, slowly, no. He doesn't explain further. Not yet. And Thomas doesn't press. He just nods and returns to sweeping. Dinner is plain. Bread, broth, and slices of boiled carrot. But there's warmth in the bowls. And laughter when Thomas makes the baby giggle by pulling faces. The baker watches quietly, stirring his spoon. He looks at the candle on the table. The wax dripping slowly down the side. It reminds him of time, how it doesn't wait. Not for bakers, not for boys, not for anything. It's a letter. Old, worn, read many times. He doesn't read it again, just holds it, then folds it back, returns it to the drawer. Some memories are best held, not repeated. He checks the window locks, pokes the fire, tucks in the baby, pulls the scarf around Thomas's neck, though the boy's already asleep. And finally, he lies down, on the cot near the oven, and just breathes. The snow's stopped. Outside, the night is still. So still that you could almost hear the stars twinkling, if you listened hard enough. But inside, there's the sound of soft breaths, of slow crackling fire, of time passing gently. He doesn't dream that night, but he doesn't need to, because sometimes, just being warm is enough. Sometimes, that's the dream. The street was almost silent now. You could hear the snow melting, just a little, dripping from the eaves in tiny taps, like the world whispering itself back awake. But inside the bakery, time had stopped, or maybe it just slowed, like thick syrup on cold toast. The air smelled of flour, not fresh anymore, not sharp, just lived in, like a room that remembers everything. The baker sat alone, near the hearth. The fire had burned low again, but not out. He didn't need much light now, just a little, just enough to see the notebook in his hands. Yes, the notebook, old, brown, the leather soft at the edges, cracked just slightly like a smiling face. It was something he'd never shown Thomas. Not yet, but maybe he would, soon. He opened it, turned the pages slowly, each one filled with neat tiny script. Recipes, measurements, but not just that. Little thoughts too. Observations, quiet ones, like, Wednesday, Mrs. Brimley cried again. Gave her a loaf extra, no charge. Thomas said the dough was alive. He's not wrong. I miss her, especially on cold days. He stops turning, stares at a single page. It's torn at the edge, smudged with flour, maybe butter. The words barely visible now, but he remembers them. Even if they're gone, they said, still here, still baking, still trying. Upstairs, the baby lets out a sleepy little squeak. The baker listens, smiles, then closes the book softly. Everything else can wait. For now, this moment was enough. The next morning came slowly, as if even the sun was tired. And outside, the snow was already a memory. Wet footprints, slush near the cobblestones. The world was moving again, and so, the baker moved too. Thomas stirred first, stretched like a cat, yawned so wide it echoed. You awake? He whispered. The baker nodded. Didn't even open his eyes at first, just whispered back, always. The day's dough was already rising, covered with a damp cloth near the oven. The baker had set it out in the earliest hours, between dreams and firelight. It was ready now, ready to become something warm, something someone might smile over. There was no market today, no calls from the alley, no deliveries, just bread, that's all. Just bread and the ritual of making it. And yet, there was something different in the air. Not big, not loud, but lighter, as if something had lifted, something invisible, but real. The kind of feeling that doesn't announce itself, just arrives, quietly, like spring. Mid-morning, Thomas finally asked, "Were you always a baker?" The question again. But this time, the baker answered. "No," he said. "I was a soldier once." Thomas blinked. "Really, Mindel? Did you fight in wars?" "I did." "Did you win?" And the silence that followed was long, but not heavy. Thomas nodded slowly, turned back to the mixing. He didn't ask anything more. Not that day. Later, after the last loaf was placed on the rack, golden and perfect, the baker handed Thomas a piece of crust. Still hot, crunchy at the edges. Thomas took it, bit down, then made a face. Too much salt. The baker raised an eyebrow. Or, Maybe your tongue's just weak." They both laughed, and that laugh, it echoed through the bakery like a bell, soft, real, alive. That evening, just as the sky turned pinkish gray and the baby fell asleep without fuss, the baker did something he hadn't done in years. He took out a tiny cracked violin from under the stairs, brushed off the dust, tuned the strings, and played. Just a little tune, one he barely remembered. The notes wobbled, fell, danced. Some were sharp, some dull, but they filled the room like sunlight on old wooden floors. Thomas sat with eyes wide. "Where did you learn that?" The baker smiled. "Before the army, before the bakery, before most things." The music faded. The silence came back, but not empty this time, full, like a room after laughter, like a kitchen after bread. The next morning, Thomas woke before the baker. That had never happened before. When the baker came down, he found the boy already at the dough, hands in flour, kneading, focused, silent, trying. He didn't interrupt, just watched, and nodded, faintly. Hours passed, and outside, the street filled with life. The clop of hooves, the cry of street vendors, the clatter of buckets. But inside the bakery, time had a different rhythm, slower, kinder. That afternoon, a girl came in. New face, carrying a little coin pouch and a smile. She asked for a small loaf, but the baker handed her two, and said the second one's from Thomas. The girl looked over. Thomas blushed. The baker said nothing more, just turned back to the oven, smiling. Days like this? They were rare, but they were real, and they made all the bad ones worth something. Even in Victorian England, even when it sucked, there were good days, warm ones, golden, like fresh bread. The bakery never made a fortune, but it made enough to keep the fire going, enough to feed the children, enough to smile sometimes, enough to sleep without hunger. The baker knew he was getting older. The aches stayed longer. The flour felt heavier, but he didn't mind, not anymore, because Thomas knew the recipes now, knew the timing, the feel, the fire. One night, when the wind was soft and the oven warm, Thomas whispered, "Someday I'll run this place, right?" The baker nodded. "You already do," he said. And that was it. No ceremony, no announcement, just bread, and love, and time. So, if you're still awake, then maybe, just maybe, you were listening closely, and if you were, then you already know why it sucked to be a baker in Victorian England, but also, why it mattered. And if you're still here now, I think you may have to see the video from the 17th minute of the story, or just play this side video. It might help you sleep even better. Goodbye.